120 words per minute for 9 minutes. 10 seconds more. 5 seconds. Start. The plaintiff filed a suit for cancellation of a gift deed and for declaration that the defendant number 1 is not the adopted son of the plaintiff, with the averments that agricultural land measuring 15 bighas as mentioned in para 1 of the plaint and agricultural land measuring 16 bighas as mentioned in para 2 of the plaint is in possession of the plaintiff. The plaintiff is having 3 daughters, all married, and his wife. The defendants and his father are also residents of the same village. The defendant number 2 is an advocate, and on account of his contacts with the plaintiff developed his confidence in defendant number 2. Both the defendants in conspiracy approached the plaintiff and stated that the plaintiff is having about 32 bighas of land, and in case half of this land is transferred by way of will, the plaintiff's land would be saved from sealing, and after some time the will would be got cancelled. Thus, taking the plaintiff in confidence, the defendant number 2 got his thumb impressions on a number of papers by playing fraud upon the plaintiff. Thereafter, the defendant number 1 filed the revenue suit against the plaintiff for declaration and permanent injunction in the court of assistant collector in August 1985, and thereafter the plaintiff came to know that the defendants got his thumb impressions on a gift deed said to be executed in June 1977 in the guise of will executed on the same day, and the fact that the defendant number 1 has claimed himself to be the adopted son of the plaintiff and also got mutation in the revenue records on the basis of this alleged gift deed. According to the plaintiff, he never took the defendant number 1 in adoption, and he never executed any gift deed, and thus the gift deed should be cancelled on the grounds stated in para 15 of the plaint, and it should also be declared that the defendant number 1 is not the adopted son of the plaintiff. The defendants, in their joint written statement, while denying all the allegations of the plaint, pleaded that the plaintiff executed a will as well as a gift deed in favor of the defendant number 1, respectively, for the agricultural lands as mentioned in paras 2 and 1 of the plaint, and since then the defendant number 2 is in possession of the entire agricultural land. It was also pleaded that the defendant number 1 was adopted by the plaintiff and his wife by performing all the rituals as mentioned in para 9 of the written statement, and thus the defendant number 1 is the adopted son of the plaintiff. An objection with regard to limitation was also taken. During pendency of this appeal, the defendant number 2 and the plaintiff have expired. Their legal heirs have been brought on record. It is not in dispute that the plaintiff and both the defendants are residents of the same village and are of the same caste. It is also not in dispute that 2 documents, will and gift deed, were executed. Gift deed was got registered at about 3:30 p.m. while will was got registered at about 3:45 p.m. It is also not in dispute that when these two documents were executed, the plaintiff had got two daughters married, one daughter unmarried, and his wife. It is also not in dispute that no other agricultural land except the agricultural lands mentioned in paras 1 and 2 of the plaint was left out with the plaintiff. In para 15 of the plaint, it has been pleaded that the plaintiff never executed any gift deed and never intended to execute any gift deed, that the plaintiff had no relations with the defendants, and thus there was no reason for such a gift, that in the guise of execution of the will, his thumb impressions were obtained on a gift deed by playing fraud. Wide written statement, all these grounds were denied, and it was pleaded that all the three daughters of the plaintiff are now married and all of them are residing with their husbands and not with the plaintiff, and since the plaintiff had no son, he took the defendant number 1 in adoption, and prior to that he executed these two documents in favor of the defendant number 1 with free mind and without any pressure or fraud or undue influence, and the defendant number 1 is in possession of the entire agricultural land. I have considered the entire evidence on the point of age of the defendant number 1 in August 1977. It is well proved that his age was above 15 years at that time, and according to subclause 4 of section 10 of the Act 1956, he was not capable of being taken in adoption by the plaintiff. Learned counsel for the defendants contended that he was taken in adoption according to the custom applicable to the parties, but this argument is devoid of merit, as there is no evidence with regard to any custom or usage applicable to the parties permitting persons to be adopted above the age of 15 years. Secondly, the fact of adoption itself is not proved at all, as according to the statement of defense witness 1, defendant number 1's age was 14 years at that time, and this oral testimony of defense witness 1 has been found untrue as being contrary to the documentary evidence produced by the defendants themselves. As regards the question of limitation, it was contended by learned counsel for the defendants that the gift deed was executed in the year 1977 and the adoption also took place in the same year, and the present suit was filed in February 1986, and thus it was barred by limitation. The plaintiff came to know about the contents of this document only when he received the notice from the Revenue Court in February 1986, and thereafter he filed the present suit without any delay, and starting point of limitation cannot be taken to be the date of execution of the document and the alleged adoption. While deciding the question of gift deed, it has been held by this court that the transaction of the gift appears to be unconscionable, and the plaintiff did not execute this gift deed knowingly. Therefore, the period of 3 years limitation is applicable from the date when the plaintiff discovered the true nature of the deed and not from the date of the execution of the gift deed as well as the alleged date of adoption. Thus, in view of the entire discussion made herein above, this appeal is hereby dismissed.